A coin toss determined earlier the order for this evening. We begin with 2-minute opening statements from each of the candidates, and we begin with Chris Coons.
Thank you. Thank you, President Harker. To our moderators, Wolf Blitzer, Nancy Karabjanian, and to our hosts, UD's Center for Political Communications and Delaware First Media. There's a great deal at stake in this election for our state, for our families, and for our country. All of us, regardless of our political leanings, recognize that Washington is broken. As I've traveled up and down the state the last 9 months as a candidate, listening to voters talk about the issues facing them in their daily lives, I've heard again and again their frustration with Washington and with elected officials who are putting narrow partisan agendas ahead of the good of our country and doing little to help millions of Americans out of work or on the verge of losing their homes or who are anxious about their futures. The partisan gridlock in Washington has real implications for us here in Delaware. There's more than 35,000 Delawareans still out of work and nearly 3,000 families that have faced foreclosure this year. These aren't just numbers. In Delaware, these are our neighbors, and we can't simply stand by and watch Washington ignore us or them any longer. In this election, Delaware's voters face a clear and important choice between, on the one hand, my opponent, a candidate who wants to take our state and country back to the failed economic policies of the past, who values partisan bickering over compromise and solutions, and who I believe has extreme positions that threaten vital education programs and would abandon our commitment to our veterans. And on the other hand, in my case, a candidate with a proven track record of balancing budgets, finding bipartisan solutions, working with Delaware's businesses, large and small, helping to create jobs and spur growth. Over the next 90 minutes, I look forward to the chance to share with you my ideas and values, Delaware values that I learned growing up in Hockessin, working here in Newark with one of Delaware's most innovative manufacturing companies and leading Delaware's second largest government. I take seriously the idea this campaign is a job interview, and tonight's debate is about giving Delaware's voters an insight into which candidate has the experience, the values, and the ideas to best represent them and do the hard work of fixing what's broken in Washington. Thank you.
Your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you to our host and for everyone being here tonight. I'm running because I'm concerned about the direction of our country. The America we knew and grew up with is being threatened in the most serious way. In just 3 years, we will be paying $1 billion a day on the interest alone on our national debt. The common sense men and women in this room and all across Delaware know that this is not sustainable. Yet my opponent wants to go to Washington and rubber stamp the failed spending bills that have cost us 2.5 million jobs. This is wrong. Uncle Sam needs to be cut off. With your vote and your support, I want to go to Washington to create jobs based on private business, not your tax dollars. I want to fight to have our nation become debt-free. I want to stop the tax hikes that are coming in January. I want to reach sustainable energy independence, support the military, and strengthen the security of our homeland. I want to fight to safeguard Social Security, improve education, and protect our constitutional liberties. In an election year when so much is at stake, just about every candidate says this. Yet what distinguishes one candidate from another are the proposed solutions to reach these goals. I very much look forward to getting down to brass tacks with all of you over the next 90 minutes because I believe there is a clear choice in this election. A vote for my opponent will cost the average Delaware family $10,000 instantly between the January tax hikes and his vote for cap and trade. Most of us can't afford that. If you think that government is too small and that you're taxed too little, if you've ever questioned whether America is a beacon of freedom and justice, then he's your guy. But if you want a U.S. Senator who will stand up to the Washington elite, who will put your interests ahead of the special interests, and make the tough decisions needed to rein in an out-of-control Washington, then I humbly ask you to vote O'Donnell for U.S. Senate. Thank you.
All right, we're now getting into our question portion of the evening, and I'll begin with you, Mr. Coons. Creating jobs to get America back to work clearly has to be a priority to do. Americans voted overwhelmingly for Democrats during the last election because most felt that the Democrats would be able to fix the failing economy. Unemployment is at 9.6%. Almost 3/4 of Americans in the most recent CNN Opinion Research Corporation poll said that the economy is still in a recession. So why should the voters of Delaware trust a Democrat this time around?
Well, Nancy, thanks for your question. I think the voters of Delaware should trust this Democrat because of my combination of experience, working in the private sector and working with the private sector. Hands-on work helping one of Delaware's most innovative companies expand and grow jobs, and concrete and engaged work as county executive, working with our Chamber of Commerce, our Business Roundtable, the Committee of 100, lots of groups who represent businesses large and small to effectively grow the economy. I've also presented as a candidate for the Senate concrete and real ideas. They're on my website, but I look forward to the chance to go over them in some detail tonight. I would advocate for a research and development tax credit, an expanded R&D tax credit that's combined with a new manufacturing tax credit that advocates for companies that invent things here and make them here, getting an extra incentive. I also think we need to change the crazy tax policy in Washington that gives an incentive to American companies to shut down operations here and ship jobs overseas. There's other things I've proposed, expanding the home office tax credit, expanding a tax credit for starting a new business that employs folks within the first couple of years, fighting harder in trade policy to make sure that we're not letting our trading partners take advantage of us in trade deals that were signed over previous years, doing more in investment and innovation. At the end of the day, I think Delaware has a long tradition of inventing and manufacturing world-class products. The best way for us to get out of this recession is through growth. And the best way to growth is by taking advantage of the skills and resources of a world-class university like this one where we're having this debate this evening, and tying that to a stronger, more qualified, more capable workforce, giving it the resources and the energy it needs to be once again the leader in the world in creating high-quality, high-value manufacturing jobs. Those are some of the ideas I look forward to discussing more this evening. Thank you.
Ms. O'Donnell, you have 1 minute for a rebuttal.
Well, first of all, we have to keep in mind that my opponent has a history of promising not to raise taxes on the campaign trail and then breaking those promises as soon as he takes office. Unemployment here in Newcastle County rose, almost doubled in the last 2 years under his watch as Newcastle County executive. Now, when it comes to the policies that he has set on the campaign trail, he will continue to rubber stamp the spending policies coming from Washington. We were promised that the stimulus bill would create jobs, but instead it cost us 2.6 million jobs. We were promised that it would keep unemployment at 8%, but instead we see unemployment at 9.7%. The Democrats are bragging that unemployment has leveled out, but while unemployment has leveled out, more people than ever are on food stamps, and our welfare spending is higher than ever. This is not the right move. This is not a move towards real economic recovery. This is a move towards creating a culture of dependency. I believe the best thing the government to...
That's the time, sorry, but now we do get to open it to discussion.
Great.
Well, what specifically, Ms. O'Donnell, would you do specifically to create jobs?
Well, what I think the best thing the government can do to get our economy back on real economic recovery is to get out of the way of the small business owner and to get out of the way of the entrepreneur. And the way you do that is to make sure these tax hikes don't come in January. You begin to roll back some of the regulation that's forced them to close their doors. A couple things that I'm proposing, and number one, a temporary 2-year tax holiday on the capital gains tax to give investors the money they need to reinvest in business, to permanently eliminate the death tax. That's not only an unjust bill because we paid taxes while we saved it, but it will also create 1.5 million new jobs.
Let me just remind that we are in the discussion portion, so you can interject here as well as we continue to discuss that point.
I'm not sure I understand what Ms. O'Donnell means when she says this is simply creating a culture of dependency and that her primary objective would be to end all the endless regulation and red tape. She denounces the Obama administration, says it's done nothing to promote job growth, when frankly just a few weeks ago, a new bill that would provide expanded SBA loan capacity, $30 billion worth of new lending capability, TARP funds that have been repaid and are being repurposed towards small and mid-sized banks all over the United States. Real and concrete steps are being taken. I also, frankly, can't imagine where she found the numbers that unemployment doubled in just the past year under my watch. I suspect we're going to need to keep a close eye this evening on the numbers that go flying back and forth.
Let's ask her, where did you find those numbers?
Department of Labor statistics, and we'll have them on our website by tomorrow. But I want to point out that he said that we're not creating a culture of dependency. How would you explain what is happening when unemployment is leveled out but more and more people are on food stamps? We've got to ask ourselves, what do we want Delawareans to be receiving? Food stamps or paychecks? I say paychecks.
Obviously paychecks. We'd like to have Americans able to receive the benefits that they need to get through incredibly difficult times. But to simply denounce people as being dependent because they're applying for and receiving food stamps.
Oh, Chris, that's
in the
not
worst
fair.
recession in modern
That's
times
not fair of you
is
to
frankly
say that.
slandering people who are in incredibly difficult times.
That's not fair of you to say that, because that's not at all what I'm doing. I'm not the person who would cut the tax benefits for disabled and low-income senior citizens as you did as county executive. But what I'm proposing is to give these to make sure that the tax cuts for all Delawareans do not expire this January. You have said that you will stop the tax cuts for the so-called rich. What you fail to realize is that the so-called rich are the small business owner, the dry cleaner down the street, the pizza shop owner who makes $300,000 before they pay their 4 employees, before they feed their own family.
Thank you.
This is going to cause them to close their doors.
We're going to try and have a conversation here this evening rather than just a diatribe if we possibly could. I think it'd be helpful for us to be able to have an exchange of ideas and let each of us take turns. So thank you for moderating, Wolf. I think it's important for folks to look closely at some of the things Ms. O'Donnell's thrown out on her new website. Most of them are untrue. Some of them are just flat-out lies. Some of them are mischaracterizations. Some of them are just factually untrue. So I'm not going to stop every single time there's something she throws out that I disagree with or I think is factually untrue. But let me just say at the outset that much of what you've put out, much of how you've characterized my record is incorrect. And if we simply sit here this evening and say, that's not true, we're not going to make much progress.
Well, do you support keeping the Bush tax cuts for all Americans or only for those making under $250,000 a year?
I support extending the Bush tax cuts for the overwhelming majority of Americans. I don't think we should draw an arbitrary line at $250,000. But the value that I will apply as deciding how much to extend, whether it goes up to $1 million or $2 million or $5 million, is that we've got a tough choice to make. Every increased tax cut, every extension that's giving, is going to cost, it's going to increase the deficit, it adds to the debt. And here's the primary value I would apply in deciding whether to extend all of the Bush tax cuts and for how long. I think we should do those tax cuts that have the best chance of getting our economy going again.
Right. We're out of time, though, for this discussion.
But you're going to have an opportunity. You're going to have an opportunity to get back into this discussion because this is issue number 1: jobs, jobs, jobs. Also the deficit. And I want to get into the deficit right now. You've made the point that the national debt is exploding. The budget deficit is exploding right now. I want some specific, meaningful cuts. If you were elected a senator from Delaware, what would you cut in the federal budget? And don't just say waste, fraud, and abuse, because everybody says that. What would you cut specifically?